his bit on toxic femininity I was cool with. I thought was cool. We've talked about toxic masculinity, and I actually don't have a problem with that term. I think the way that I can conceive of both of them, it's that there's these perhaps culturally pushed ways that men or masculine people ought to be, and there's culturally pushed ways that women ought to be, or perhaps even tend to be. And when we have cultural ways that these might be accepted, but get into a territory of harm.
Yep.
And so people are pretty familiar with toxic masculinity. That's been discussed many times. And I actually think that some of the ways in which they're discussed are totally reasonable. Boys can't cry, all this kind of stuff. Not helpful for the boys, not helpful for society, etc. Toxic femininity, it's like, what is that? And I thought he had a really interesting take on it, which is the toxic femininity is the proclivity to infantilize everything and view those who resist that infantilization as predators. And that matches, I think that's a really good description of some of what you see in the I'm offended by that category of people who need the way that an infant deals with the world is that they are incapable of changing themselves or their approach. They cannot put shoes on. They need to have the world made softer for them by someone else. That is the only approach that an infant can have to the world. And so that what a mother does is comes in and here's your food, they spoon it into your mouth, they make sure that the world works for you. It's the only way to survive as an infant, and it's a totally reasonable approach. When at some point in life, and I don't know if this needs to be done by dad or, perhaps a more healthy feminine could do this more often for people, there needs to be a demand of self-reliance at some point. And with children, it starts with like, can you sleep through the night? Or do I come in and rescue you every time you're crying? And if that urge is, the rescuer always steps in, that's where toxic femininity comes in. And I thought it was interesting to hear him sort of talk about college.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I 100% agree, but his perspective was that for some of the women who are, make up what he would call the woke group of some of these colleges, that their toxic femininity is on display in how they infantilize the students to make up for the infants that they never had.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a little bit too Freudian on the nose for me, but I did think was interesting.
Was that your experience in college?
What I do think is an interesting way to view college is the extension of adolescence, and you can even extend adolescence to like, this is the extension of infancy, which is the way that I treated college, no fucking joke, was 4 years to not grow up, and then I hadn't grown up at the end of the 4 years, let me go back to grad school and not grow up again. And it was shield me from the consequences of my actions while I pretend that this is in the name of education. And that is something that I do think, like the way that the U.S. talks about education and the way that we talk about universal higher education, this conversation made me realize that is concerning to me, because the best education that I eventually got was when I had to pay my college debts. And it was the financial education I never got. It was the holy crap, I have to do work that I don't like in order to make up for the time where I lived off borrowed goods in the future. And I do look back and I go like, what were the largest losses that I've ever had in my life that I don't think I got my money's worth out of were college and grad school.
Right.
Now, people always say, well, what else are you going to do? What's the other path? And I think the truth is our society hasn't really carved out, you can enter the workforce immediately, but it's
trade school.
You can go to trade school, you can join the military. But a lot of those, there's not necessarily, it's like you're in your parents' home in high school, and there's not really a good ritual transition.
I think college is fine. It's just way too expensive for that to be the ritual transition of the university. It's like you have, $100K in debt, and you learned very little, and you spent 4 years there, and then you did another year to.
And the problem is that, like, I think back to when our parents, mom and dad, were there. Like, dad worked through college and paid it down while he was there. The ability to take out debt made it so that my experience of college was one of very, like, no pressure, while I was able to not realize the financial implication of all of my decision making.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there was this period where we really, I don't know if it's lionized or idealized this experience of college, which you shouldn't have to work. You shouldn't have to have a part-time thing. You shouldn't have to do this. You should get to just be a full-time student. And what that becomes is, if there is no responsibility, this was definitely my experience, It was how often can I go to the bar and drink, or, you know, can I stay in the play flip cup and then go out or mess around, screw around, and pretend that reading this chapter or taking this test is what the world will be asking and demanding of me in the future.
Yep.
And then I remember feeling from my liberal arts education and in myself this spite towards the world for not being appreciated, because I could write an essay that my teacher gave an A to. And I look back at some of those essays and they're fucking lame. Wow. They're not interesting. Some of them have seeds of something in there. But I'm
more interested in that vitriolic emotion that you should be appreciated for what you did in your little ecosystem.
Well, yeah, I think that there is a truth to our society doesn't appreciate the liberal arts, and that is to its own detriment, right? Mm-hmm. If it's all engineering, doctors, this, that, how do we make the math work? There is heart, soul connection that is lost. But that, again, can when not tempered with a need to produce in the world, as it was for 4 or 5 years of my life, where it was just like I was in this cocoon of all that mattered was books and essays, and you shouldn't have to ever contend with the real world in a way.
It was a credits game. How much can I fit into this to finish at a 4-year late? Sorry, I'm fucking up my words. But how much credits do I need in this semester to then graduate on time?
Yes.
It's like a credits game.
Yes. That the hardcore buffering of that experience from pressures of the real world, and then everyone blames capitalism. Like, we should just get to write poetry all day. We should just get to do this, not realizing that it's not capitalism that has imposed the demands of like needing to work to have food. That is a system of trade and barter and et cetera, because the world does not ready provide your lunch, dinner, shelter, et cetera, and you need to provide value to someone else in a way that they find meaningful in order to acquire that, unless I wanted to learn how to farm, construct a house, create an internet, and all that on my own.
And then to bring it like back around, I personally feel that I would have never grown up if I hadn't had the pressures, like you said earlier, of staying in an infantile. I will stay as an infantile because it's comfortable. Yes. If someone's going to wipe my butt and feed me, I'll enjoy it and then complain about it that it's not fair. But I didn't grow up until after I left that ecosystem of college as well. So don't want to give suffering to people, but geez, like,
that is something that I've had to learn. This I don't want to make you suffer is, I think that you can call it masculine. I don't think it needs to be masculine energy, but this came to me in one of the recent journeys that we had, was like, this shielding of the people that you love from the experience of their pain is not love. It is panic. It is self-obsession. It is an inability to be grounded enough in that they are okay and that I am okay and that they can get through it, and that life entails pain, and it is not my job, nor would it be good for them, for me to intervene on their behalf constantly. That keeps both of us umbilical cord connected. How I've set up a lot of relationships in my life in this way, in a very unhealthy way. And that there is like that stereotypical, archetypal, perhaps dad energy, which is like, let him figure it out. Let him find his feet. And that can, of course, go too far when you're like a Spartan who throws your kid into the pit.
Yeah.
But perhaps that was appropriate for that time period of what life really meant.
Yeah, you didn't make it past 25.
And, of course, the balance of each of those, which is like, no, we need to make the world nicer for people. And, no, we need to prepare people for the world as it is. There's a yin-yang balance there that is desirable, that is, of course, evolving over time as the world is made softer for so many people, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.